Taylor.
Yeah, let's go. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, I missed you too, Ed. I want to welcome everybody to the first meeting of the Health and Human Services Committee for the 2017 year. And I will officially call this meeting to order. Tried to wait a little bit and see if some of our members can get here. We're moving a little bit slow. Most of you know that this is the beginning of a 2-year term. And all the bills that were in the hopper last year, even if they got to the very last vote, they died. And so at the beginning of each new 2 years, it takes a little time for bills to begin to filter into committees and for us to begin to meet. So welcome back, everybody. We do, first of all, let me introduce the staff. We have our wonderful attorney back, Betsy Howerton. Betsy, stand up. You're back there. Yay, Betsy. The best attorney in the legislative office for us, and probably the most overworked because everybody loves Betsy. So we're glad to have you back. And my staff is Long Tall John is back with us again. For the 3rd year, the last year, he has to either go back to graduate school or get a real job. The old college professor here has told him no longer can he do this just for fun and starving. And Rachel Weber is with us. This is Rachel. She's a Georgia Tech student and is one of the kids in the program for a legislative assignment. So if y'all need us, they know where to find me. They're with me all the time. We also have 4 new members. I'm going to start off with Karen Mathiak. Did I get it right? Because I was afraid that I would not remember how to say her last name. You may hear us refer to her, if she pushes her button, as Representative Karen. You want to stand up just for a minute, introduce yourself, and then tell where you represent and your...
I'm Karen Mathiak, District 73, which is Spalding, Henry, and Fayette counties.
And Karen is a chiropractor, so she brings that in a different perspective to the committee. Scott Hilton. Scott?
Yep. Scott Hilton. I am District 95, which is Gwinnett County, Peachtree Corners, Norcross, Duluth, that area. So.
And I just asked Scott what his background was, and he said, I'm a banker. And I said, did you ask for this committee? And he said yes, that he does a lot of work in the...
I do a lot of work in the special needs community, so we're real plugged in with there. We have a child with special needs, and so excited to lend that knowledge to the committee.
And we're certainly glad to have you on the committee because we get a lot of bills, and it's a special interest, certainly, of mine. And so thank you. We also have Mark Newton. Mark?
Yes. Hey, I'm Mark Newton. I'm an emergency physician from Augusta in Columbia County, District 123. Excited to be here serving with the chairman here.
So if anybody has an emergency, you have my permission to, interrupt the meeting, and we'll let Mark show how, do his trade. I almost needed you the other day on the floor. I was choking on a piece of apple. Did you hear me? I had to leave the thing during the prayers and so forth. So it does come up. So if he's around if we ever have any emergencies. And last but not least, we have Deborah Silcox. Deborah?
Hello, my name is Deborah Silcox, and I'm the new state representative for District 52. And District 52 is Sandy Springs and part of Buckhead. I'm an attorney by training and married to an orthopedic surgeon, and I'm just delighted to be here.
Well, and certainly being married to the orthopedic surgeon takes it a precedent over being an attorney. And I love Joe Wilkerson, but she's definitely an improvement on how she looks. Don't tell Joe I said that with this because he was a favorite of mine. So I'm glad to have everybody back. This is a great committee. It's a large committee. We have 35 members. Usually we'll run somewhere around 20 or 22. Several of our committee members are chairmen, like myself, and we don't always make it to the other committees that we're on because of our schedule. So the first thing we have to do is a committee. In the back of your folder, if you look in the very back, clipped on behind the list of committee meetings, we have the rules of the committee. And so you take a quick minute. Basically, a quorum is 11. So please, will 11 of you show up really quickly and timely to committee meetings so we can get started? It's not a problem now, but as we get busier in the session, it may be. The committee meets on really basically when I decide and I set the agenda. We normally will be meeting on Tuesdays at this time, so this is our time slot. As we get toward the end of the session, very often things will come up in a hurry, and we will just have to try to find time to meet. And that's especially true as we get down to the 34th, 35th, those days getting close to day 40. So try to do as little of that as possible. Sort of look over the other members. I don't use subcommittees usually. I reserve the right to use subcommittees. And I tell you the reason I don't. A lot of people use subcommittees, and 3 or 4 people will make decisions, and they'll hear the testimony about a bill. And I feel like that the bills that come before us are often so complex that we all need to hear them, not just 4 or 5 members of a subcommittee. And that's the reason why I don't do it. Now, like I say, I reserve the right to do subcommittees if I ever feel the need to do it, but I really want the whole committee to hear the testimony. And when people do subcommittees, usually they don't rehear that testimony back in the whole committee again. If they did, it would mean people would have to come and testify twice, and it's just, something that I don't usually do.
Madam Chair,
Yes?
any changes from previous rules?
No?
At the proper time, I'd like to move to pass.
Okay. I have a motion to pass in a second. Do I have any questions? There's no questions from the committee. Okay. Everybody in favor of the passage of the rules for the Health and Human Services Committee, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? No? Okay, thank you very much. We now have rules. And that gets us to our first part. I am going to change the agenda a little bit and have our presentation first. And this is about, and I'm going to have trouble with the name, myalgic. Somebody help me out who's going to be the first presenter. Pardon? Go ahead again. We've got
Myalgic encephalomyelitis.
There we go. All right. Is there a shortening term for that? MEC? CFS, okay. All right, and now see, our first person is Timbri Livesay? Okay, that's you, okay. Welcome to Health and Human Services. Can you get over there to a mic, okay?
Yep.
And in case the committee is wondering about all the uniforms, we have not done anything. We're not under terrorist threat. It's, really experts from the CDC. We will be able to ask them questions and see if they have any comments they want to make. And I really appreciate the fact that they would let you come from the CDC. I think it is a resource that we do not use often enough here in Georgia. And hopefully we will be able to utilize that resource more. Okay. Timbri, go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. We'd like to start by thanking Representative Cooper, Chairwoman Cooper, for inviting us to speak today. We really appreciate it. And thanks to every representative who's here today. And as one more round of thanks for the CDC, we have Dr. McQuiston, Dr. Unger, Athena, and Robin Curtis. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Timbri Livesay, and I am 4 years sick. Due to myalgic encephalomyelitis, or ME/CFS, I have lost my career, my independence, and my ability to actively parent. My 6-year-old's room is on the 2nd floor of our home, and I can no longer walk the stairs to put him to bed. So instead, he pushes me in my wheelchair, and we go to my bed, and we read stories there. Ryan Pryor, who you'll meet shortly, and I also represent the estimated 32,000 to 79,000 Georgians suffering from ME/CFS. Our beleaguered community collectively costs the Georgia economy $500 million every year. Many of the ME/CFS community's concerns boil down to federal funding issues, so we're not here asking for state dollars. We're just asking for your attention, your understanding, and perhaps your guidance. Many of you may not have heard of ME/CFS before, and that's part of our larger issue. The disease has been swept under the rug for 30 years due to its complexity, its diagnostic issues, its lack of formal medical code, the inability of doctors to give a hoot because they can't bill under said medical code, and the trivializing common name, chronic fatigue syndrome, which makes it sound like we're just kind of tired. There is enormous stigma because we don't always look as sick as we are on the outside. This is a disease of cellular energy production, something you can't see. But if just sitting here and talking to you today, my body thinks, and I assure you I feel it, like it's running a marathon. So anyway, I'd like to turn your attention now to my colleague Ryan Pryor. He is a journalist and social entrepreneur who works with CNN, or at CNN. He was the founder and editor-in-chief of the Georgia Political Review and went on to jobs writing for the Daily Beast and USA Today. He wrote, co-directed, and produced the feature-length documentary Forgotten Plague. He is the president of the Blue Ribbon Foundation and an award-winning ME/CFS advocate. Thank you.
Ryan, do you need to work your computer? Or you can speak from there if you want to. I mean, so you can work it?
So, myalgic encephalomyelitis, and more commonly known as chronic fatigue syndrome, it's affected me dramatically for the past 10 years. It forced me to drop out of high school for 7 months. And even now, I'm coming off of a 3-week medical leave of absence from my employer at CNN because of this illness. And although I'm functional a lot of the time, I still take 20 pills a day. I give myself a shot once a week, and I get an IV treatment at a clinic once a month. And it works for me, but my friend Timber here is on the same regime with the same doctor, and she's only gotten worse, and she still is in a wheelchair. So there's no FDA-approved treatments yet, and there's no easy answers, but we're hoping that will change soon. So 1 million Americans suffer with the ME/CFS, or 17 million people worldwide, and the disease affects young and old, men, women, and Black, white, Hispanic. It doesn't discriminate across any economic or racial background. Many people lose their jobs, their friends, and some even lose the ability to walk or to talk or to even eat at all. And the central feature of ME/CFS is a global decline in functioning due to any mental or physical exertion. That means if someone with ME/CFS climbs a set of stairs, or someone takes a shower, that can leave them bedridden for a day or a month, or a day or a week or even a month. The disease has a lower quality of life than renal failure, lower quality of life than lung cancer, and lower quality of life than multiple sclerosis. And like multiple sclerosis was once dismissed as hysterical paralysis, ME/CFS has also medically floundered in stigma and understanding. This same dark side of medical history has happened with Alzheimer's, it's happened with epilepsy, it's happened with AIDS, and it's happening right now with ME/CFS. It's been a garbage pail diagnosis, but is a specific, a real, and a cruel disease desperately in need of real attention. According to a 2013 DePaul University study, only 6% of U.S. medical schools teach this disease, and oftentimes the information they use is inadequate or out of date. And clinical guidelines that mainstream doctors use oftentimes include harmful information that doesn't help patients, but actually sets them back worse. So because of this lack of appropriate education, most doctors actually can't even identify a case of this disease when it's in the same room with them. So we have an 80% misdiagnosis rate. So patients often go for decades going from doctor to doctor to doctor. And myself, I saw 16 doctors before I was diagnosed, and this is on the lower end. Many people go see a lot more before they finally get an answer for what's wrong with them. And there's no current universal accepted biomarker for diagnosing this disease, and that's one of the main reasons why it's so hard to get a name for what's wrong with patients. Although there are dozens of abnormalities in the spinal fluid and the blood and in the brain imaging, to name a few. So there's emerging things that could become that universal biomarker. And most clinicians who are in this field are oftentimes reaching retirement, so it's very hard for patients to get a doctor who's knowledgeable enough and even willing to treat them. So in order to find the root cause of what's going on with this disease and to eventually find treatments for it, the most important thing is federal funding. So the National Institutes of Health right now is giving about $5 million to research ME/CFS each year. And it's been doing that since 1995. And after years of pressure from patient community and from activists, that number has now doubled from $5 million to $10 million. And that announcement was made in the last month or so. But as one person with ME/CFS put it, when you're starving to death on a cup of rice a day, the addition of another cup of rice sounds like a banquet, but you're still going to starve to death. So to equitably fund ME/CFS based on its severity, based on its prevalence, and based on its economic burden to society, that number of federal funding would actually be $188 million. And that by comparison, multiple sclerosis, which is a similar neuroimmune disease, it receives 10 times the funding that ME/CFS does for only half the number of patients. And I mean, 75% of ME/CFS patients can't work, which means I'm in the 25% of ME/CFS patients that actually can have a job. Now, among the ones who can't work, 25% of the patients are bedbound or homebound. So this causes a $24 billion dent to the U.S. economy each year. And if you split them up by Georgia, that's a $685 million dent to the Georgia economy. And if you split it up by each individual patient, that means that each patient is losing $24,000 each year in lost wages, inability to work, social services, and expensive medical treatments. So if the average family median income is $48,000 and you're losing $24,000 each year, it's enough to wreck the finances of any person that this disease comes in contact with. So we're confident that history is going to show that our disease was ultimately redeemed after being neglected through the thoughtful work of scientists and doctors, patients, and even public policymakers like yourselves who understand the nature of the threat. Scientists at Stanford and Cornell believe we can cure this disease in 3 to 10 years, given enough social and financial support. There's a 5% spontaneous recovery rate, which means that there is a path to wellness. This disease will be demystified. It will be eliminated, but for those of us who are sick and have to deal with it every single day, in a wheelchair or taking 20 pills a day, we'd rather that be sooner rather than later. Now, after college, rather than taking my dream job, which is working for The Atlantic, I made a different choice. I chose to build a nonprofit foundation and travel the country producing a feature-length documentary about this disease, interviewing scientists, doctors, and patients all over the country. And as a journalist, I believe that this is the single greatest untold medical story of our time. I'll show you a clip of this film. It's called Forgotten Plague. It's available on iTunes and Amazon and DVD, and it's showed in theaters. It premiered at the Chinese Theater in Hollywood. One of the stories that we show in this film is of Ron Davis. He's a Stanford geneticist and one of the most brilliant scientists alive. He was one of the creators of the Human Genome Project, and The Atlantic named him one of the inventors that tomorrow's historians will see as today's greatest inventors. However, his son has been flattened by ME/CFS. His son is unable to walk, is unable to speak. He hasn't spoken a word in 3 or 4 years. He's unable to even tolerate touch, and he can't eat. He has the same diagnosis that I have, the same diagnosis that Timber has, but he's receiving nutrients directly into his stomach via a J-tube, and that's the only way that he stays alive. So his father, who's a scientific visionary, has the capacity to be one of the people who helps cure this disease, but he can't receive funding to study his son's disease because of this lack of attention from the medical establishment and because of the stigma around ME/CFS. And this is a disease that his son is dying from.
Davis isn't just any father. The Atlantic recently asked, who will tomorrow's historians consider today's greatest inventors? Among the answers, her PayPal founder, Elon Musk, father of the internet, Vint Cerf, Amazon.com founder, Jeff Bezos, and yes, Dr. Ron Davis, for his work in helping increase the power of the Human Genome Project 10 million-fold.
My son was a fabulous photographer and traveled around the world, and I just loved his photographs. First time I think he ever had a camera, I gave him a digital camera that when it first came out, and I handed him the camera and enough cards, and I said, don't worry about making a mistake. It doesn't matter, we just erase them. So just take all the pictures you want. And when we got home, when I loaded them on the computer, I was expecting to find a few, and I was blown away. Every picture was in focus, perfect framing, and really interesting. So it's really a shame that he really is not able to do any of that at all now.
2 Christmases ago, really, is what I remember. Him coming in and saying, I'll come in and sit at the table for a little bit with special pads on the chair. He'd come in his wheelchair because he couldn't really walk anymore. And he sat at the Christmas table with us, and he just said, just tell people I can't talk, and please don't talk to me. Don't even look at me. I just want to be with you. So he sat in there with us for a little while. And that's when I remember it, really. That's my marker for the not talking.
It's just hard to watch his personality gradually kind of be taken from him, because he was so... I was made fun of because I was the sister that he was like, let's go for a hike. And I was like, I don't want to, I want to watch TV, you know? And he was just like so full of energy and life, and he traveled the world and was like went hiking all of the time. And so to watch just one thing after another be taken from him.
And he's a pretty private person, so having him allow you to see him, you know, sitting there in his shorts, all skinny like that, and so sick. It's a big, big thing for him. The best music collection ever. It's all this world music and classical music and Bob Marley and just everything imaginable. That's just beautiful. Buddhist chants, and there's always music on in there. But in the last month, I haven't heard any music anymore.
It's like, you know, I'm having to grieve this loss, even though he's still here.
My co-director and cinematographer, Nicole Castillo, was the only one of us to go inside Whitney's room. All across the country, she had prided herself on keeping composure, no matter how tough and how devastating the story was. But none of it prepared her for seeing Whitney.
I used to like give him a little hug or touch his shoulder every time I was in there, just something to show him I love him, you know? But then at one point he texted me no touch. So, and every once in a while he sends us a little red heart in a text. We got a couple of those in the last couple weeks, which is just so moving to us. It's like a little window of Whitney reaching out there. Because most of the time he's just completely uncommunicative. And it's really hard because doctors don't really know. I mean, these are the biggest experts in the world about it. I mean, some of them, and they sit there and say, we're just guessing. We don't really know. There's, you know, some things help for some people, some things help for others. We know that these certain things help a certain number of people. We just have to try them. Think about first do no harm and then try to help.
I have this responsibility. I have to be the one who tries to figure it out, and that's really hard on me.
Ryan, thank you for producing that and for bringing it for us to see.
We actually also have a scientist here who is going to give us the researcher's perspective on ME/CFS.
All right.
Jared Younger is a researcher who leads the Neuroinflammation, Pain, and Fatigue Laboratory at the University of Birmingham, Alabama. He previously worked at the Stanford ME/CFS Initiative for 8 years before being recruited to Alabama in 2014. He directs a group of 22 scientists and students and currently conducts research under several grants from the NIH and Department of Defense. His primary expertise is in human brain imaging, immune tracking, and testing of new treatments.
Dr. Younger, thank you for joining us. We're a pretty smart panel. I consider the representative on my committee to be some of the smartest in the House. However, most on the committee do not have a medical background. There's a few of us. So plain English, please, and not to no abbreviations and, okay?
No acronyms. I get that, and I see I need to do this quickly as well, so I'll
Yes,
be sure
sir. Thank
to do
you.
that, of course. So I spend about half of our lab's time working on this disorder, and the reason I do that is because the way I calculate this, if we have 2 million people in the United States that have this disorder, every year that I don't come up with the treatment, that is 2 million years of lost productivity, that's 2 million years of lost life collectively when you add all these people together. So I feel a great sense of urgency to fix this as fast as possible. And there are many other groups that are working on the same problem. And the shame is that this is absolutely something that we can cure. And the reason I say that is because we actually have a pretty good idea what's going on here. There are a lot of groups working on this. Some of the discoveries have been made via the CDC, some have been made via NIH, some of them have occurred outside the United States, but collectively we have some very solid studies showing what is wrong with these individuals. There is no way possible I could even scratch the surface and show you all the amazing things that's happened in the last year. I just want to give you just a few pictures to give you an idea of what we are working on, and then we'll conclude this. There are blood tests that very clearly show what is wrong in these individuals, and I got a little laser pointer. Not only can we test inflammatory markers in the blood, these are things that can cause you to feel sick, but we can track people over time with these diseases. These are 3 women with CFS. Their daily fatigue is in blue, and then our inflammatory markers are in green. And what you can see is it tracks almost perfectly with their good and bad days when we draw blood every single day. So we have the ability to not only test whether someone has ME/CFS, but we can track their good and bad days. What happens here, and this is the 1-minute version of the science, is when you have these inflammatory chemicals in your blood, they cross into the brain and they activate these cells called microglia. This is what a microglia is supposed to look like in the top left. When you get sick, it starts to look like the cell on the bottom right. That's when they're activated. So every time you get a flu, horrible case of the flu or some other disease, and you can't get off the couch, these cells are the reason why you can't get off the couch. It's not the flu that does that to you. It's your own immune cells. The chemicals they produce make it impossible for you to get up and move around. What we think is happening in CFS is these cells are being chronically activated, so they're in this active sick state, so it makes the people feel like they can't move around as if they had a serious case of the flu, even though they don't. So it's a pathology of the immune system. We can see in brain scans, this definitely seems to be the case. We have some radioactive scans that can show the activated microglia in the brain. And now we're working on brain temperature. So instead of doing this radioactive injection, we can bring you into the lab, and in 12 minutes, we can get the entire temperature of your brain. So just like you take the temperature of your body to know if you're sick, we can get brain temperature to see if you have a fever in the brain. And that's exactly what we're finding. We can do these temperature maps, and these 3 here are people with CFS. They have a fever in the brain, just like you would have a fever in the body, and that suggests that there's inflammation that's locked in the brain. So a lot of interesting things we're coming up with that give clues to what can happen next. A couple more points and then I'll wrap up. Taking all the literature together, there's a chunk of people who have difficulties with metabolism, there's a chunk that have a sensitized immune system, and then there's a chunk that probably have a low-level bacterial or viral infection. And we can solve all of those problems. Again, this is not about asking for funding, but I do have to say that we have the resources, we have the equipment to fix this, we have the intellectual resources, we have the scientists who want to fix this, and we have incredibly promising leads. So we definitely can do this. The only obstacle is the funding that can allow us to do the next studies. And it's getting better, but we still need to improve it. And the increased attention and awareness will help us get there. Last point, there's nothing different about these individuals. All of us carry the cells in our brain that can make this happen to us. It's unpredictable. You can get a flu and you never recover. A car wreck, you never recover. Even sometimes pregnancy, and they have this and they never recover. So this can happen to any of us. It happens to really highly functioning people every single day. So it's absolutely something we have to stop. And if we can cure this, this has implications for major depression, because a lot of them suffer from the same thing, traumatic brain injury, so when a veteran or non-veteran gets hit in the head, the neuroinflammation is what drives the long-term problems from that. Fibromyalgia, there's just a list of conditions. So the stakes are very high. What we can do is limited by the funding and how fast we can do it, but we will keep working on this problem with what we have until we fix it.
Thank you very much. So in other words, this is like having the cells that make you tired when you have the flu. It's like the switch doesn't work. They turn on when you're sick, but if they go to this, they just never turn off, and your off and on switch doesn't work.
Absolutely.
It's what you're thinking is the cause.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
stuck and on,
Yep.
and then continues to do it. Thank you for your research. Thank you for presenting. Stay sort of close by. The doctors from the CDC, I sort of got mixed messages that you'd be here to answer questions, or did one of y'all want to make a presentation about where the CDC is with this, or briefly?
Yeah, I think we were just prepared to answer questions if you had it, but we can say.
Okay. Well, and for the new committee members and people that don't know, often, especially early on when we don't have a lot of bills, we will have informational type presentations like this. There is so much going on in medicine. It's truly on hyperspeed and what's developing. And we've seen that as we've decided about different kind of meds, and we've passed bills out of here. So I just want you to be informed. It also gives a public forum to spread more information about these illnesses and make us more understanding as we go out into our districts. I'll so take a quick minute. I had a late member come in. Our new whip is here, Representative Christian Coomer, back here. Christian's new to our whip, and he is visiting all the committees to see what's going on. I told him that, he's going to want to come back to us because we have the most interesting and also the most, sometimes the most controversial. So we'll try to not have that problem today, but you're welcome anytime, Mr. Whip. Okay, questions from the committee briefly for anybody that presented, or for the ladies from the doctors from the CDC?
I have a question.
Okay, Representative Silcox?
I was just curious if these people have been connected to the human genome, who've been affected by it. Do you know if there's any genetic component to all the victims of this disease? If you'll just tell us again, please, who you are. And we know you were the CDC.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'm Elizabeth Unger from the CDC, and there is evidence that there's a genetic component to this disease, but the exact genes have not been pinned down. There's studies of twins, and that's how that's been kind of picked up. I do have fact sheets available from CDC if you would like access to them.
We'll be glad to pass them out.
Okay.
If you'll give them to Rachel. I think she's closest to you. Thank you for bringing those. Okay. Any other questions? Betty Price, Dr. Price?
Yes. What is the extent of the understood number of people that have this? What's the prevalence or incidence?
That's actually a difficult answer because people aren't diagnosed effectively.
Mm-hmm.
CDC did do a study in Georgia in about 2007, a population-based study, and on the basis of that and other studies that have been done, we estimate that about 1 million people in the U.S. are affected.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Representative Bennett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for the lateness. There was a conflict in committee meetings. The doctor mentioned that there is a cure, and you know of a cure, and if you've already answered this, he said he know how to fix it. You could fix it.
If we had that
cure.
Okay, so you don't already know how to fix it. Okay, thank you.
Some things work for some people, and they get kind of like lucky.
diagnosed, that their biology matches up with something they try. But the rest of us try the same thing and we get worse, or we stay the same.
But all patients will benefit by a caring physician that understands
Yes.
the illness, and there's a crying need. Georgia itself does not have a doctor that actually specializes in this illness, and it's a crying need for more physicians that really understand the illness. And that's one of the things CDC is working with the Institute of Medicine, issued a report in 2015 which discusses what is known about this illness and proposed an improved, simplified diagnostic criteria so that physicians would be better equipped to recognize it.
Okay, thank you. Representative Sharper.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of questions here. What would you say, how many new cases are we having in Georgia on an average year? How many new cases?
I think the CDC would probably be better at answering that.
Yeah, boy, the incidence is also very difficult to get a good number on, so I can't give you that number. It's because the illness is so very long-lasting, and you need to be ill about 6 months before it's firmly diagnosed. Putting the studies together to really look at incidence is difficult, but it's a fairly low incidence because people get ill and don't get better.
Okay, and the
Yeah.
second little follow-up to that is, what would you say is the median or average age when it's
Right.
detected?
It is a very, very broad age range, but in the 40s and 50s is the biggest age group.
Okay.
5, though, so it
It's a ve-
impacts children dramatically.
Very, very, very broad age. And particularly the younger the onset is, the more long life, more impact it has on your life, because it
Okay.
interferes with education.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Mathiak.
Okay, it's my understanding that you said it's about 6 months to diagnosis, approximate.
Well, it's, the clinical criteria are that if you've been ill, fatigued for 6 months and there's not an explanation, that's when you start considering this illness.
Okay, so fatigue is the number one symptom that you're
It's not just regular fatigue, it's a pathologic fatigue that really interferes with your ability of daily activities. And the other characteristic symptom is something that's called post-exertional malaise, and that is even mild activity can make all of the symptoms worse. And it is sort of a symptom complex, almost like when you have the flu.
So the triggers could be anything from some type of traumatic injury to virus, correct?
Well, yeah, we don't have a definite trigger. There are a lot of acute infectious illnesses that go on, a small percentage go on to an illness that's very much like ME/CFS, and it's called post-infectious fatigue. And about 70% of patients in clinics report this acute onset that seemed like a viral-like illness. But there's also people that reported after a traumatic injury, after stressful life events, and then there's always a percentage that could not identify a particular etiology.
Can the protocols be similar depending on if the trigger is traumatic injury? Do you use the same protocol, and do you find that protocol is successful, or?
Right, so when you say protocol, I think you mean clinical approach to the patient.
Yes.
Each patient is very different, and the best advice that clinicians have is to treat the symptoms. And so the symptoms are treated symptomatically. It's kind of a supportive care approach. And we really need to understand more about the illness.
Thank you,
Madam Chair.
Thank you so much for everybody for coming and for the presentation, and also for the video. I don't think anybody here watching it was not moved, and saying to themselves how lucky they were if they have a family member who doesn't suffer from this. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, that was the last question I had on the board, and so we're going to move on to the next part. We'll give Timbri a little chance. Thank you again. No, it's not always easy getting into the Capitol and into our legislative office building. And we'd love to keep the ladies from the CDC. Hope you're interested in us trying to expand an access to dental care for our children across. I'm sure that's something that y'all also study at the CDC. Okay. And up next is our bill. It's House Bill 154. I am turning that over to Representative Hatchett. He's number 2 on the signer. We have worked together on this, and so Representative Hatchett, you are on. Everybody should find the bill or been given a bill. Does everybody have the bill? I know it by heart practically. Rachel? Bring me a copy. I do really, almost by heart.
Well,
You're-
thank you, Madam Chair, for turning it over. Y'all be careful when you sign number 2 on a bill. You never know what it's going to bring. No, thank you. I want to just start off with saying that this bill is a bill that is a compromise among the interested parties. I don't know that they all are 100% happy. So in my brief stint here, I think that usually means it might be a pretty good bill. But what this bill does, just in general, is it basically, we'll go through it sort of line by line or however in detail you want to go through, but it allows for general supervision of hygienists in several places outside of the dental offices and inside the dental offices. Up to 4 hygienists can be supervised per dentist. Locations have to be that the general supervision is occurring not in the office, has to be within a 50-mile radius of the office. It also allows for dental assistants to perform what's called a, hold on, let me find exactly how you say that. A rubber cup prophylaxis or prophy, and that is usually used on children that have not developed very much plaque or things, if any, on their teeth, but they do need some sort of polishing or cleaning of the teeth to help prevent future decay or future problems with the teeth. The bill allows for a lot more opportunities for us to care for older patients that may not be able to come into dental offices, and it also is reaching out to the younger children, students, population. That's kind of an overview of the bill. I don't know if I've left any main super thing out, but we can go through it kind of page by page if the committee would like, or I can just start taking questions.
Representative Hatchett, do you mind if I give some of the history on this?
Sure.
For the new committee members and any that weren't here last year, in the state of Georgia, dental hygienists could not practice, could not clean teeth and do what dental hygienists do, taking the x-rays and all, unless the dentist was in the building. That was direct supervision. And so one of the things that this bill does is allow them to go to general supervision, so that in certain settings and all, that they could practice and clean teeth. For example, to put it in our perspective, I don't know how many of you have ever been on the schedule to have your teeth cleaned or go into the dentist to be checked, and where you always go to the dentist, and the dentist was sick, and so the hygienist couldn't clean your teeth that day because the dentist was not going to be present. So now, if you were an established patient and the dentist was out sick, the dental hygienist could still clean your teeth. And it also, when Representative Hatchett talks about the fact that it opens it up, we are seeing many more school-based health programs out there. We have thousands of children that under Peach Care are entitled to get some kind of dental care and don't have access to it. It would allow dental hygienists, if, and just like nurse practitioners and PAs, if the dentist they work for agrees to let them do this, their dentist can allow up to 4 dental hygienists to go out into the community and clean teeth and in certain settings. It's strictly up to the dentist, just like it is with physicians. If they want to have a nurse practitioner or a PA, and they decide what they allow them to do. And, you know, a dentist might have 2 dental hygienists that he feels confident that can go out and work on their own. And he might have 2 that he doesn't want to allow do that. It's up to the dentist. The dentist can decide whether he wants to do a dental exam first or not. It's the same way as we use our nurse practitioners and our PAs. The dentist is the team leader, and they decide how they want to do it. So that's what started it. It started with us allowing the dental hygienist to work outside under general and without the dentist being present. And then as we looked at the coverage and looked at all of it, and Representative Hatchett, we looked at what happens in the dentist's private offices, how they use their assistants, the whole dental team. So now, that's sort of an overview as we went through last year. Now for questions.
And also, like she said, the dentist that's practicing now can do this or can choose not to do this. So it's not a must.
Okay, like we do in other, we don't have a lot of bills now, so allow everybody 1 or 2 questions, and then if you need to come back, I'll go through the list of people that are asking questions and let you come back. So we don't have multiple questions, and then I don't get to everybody. Representative Reinders.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and appreciate the work on this, and some of mine are just yes or no's. We had a concern on this committee last year that the dental office could not be located out of state. I'm assuming that's still in there?
That is correct.
Thank you
It is
so
in
much.
state, and all dentists that are mentioned in this are Georgia licensed dentists.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. If I may continue. There was also discussions with Scott and the Dental Association, and this is not so much a hard question for the Dental Association, but this was all about the underserved areas of Georgia. And it's my hope that those discussions are going on to make sure that we still have dental access within those underserved areas.
Yes.
And then finally, very quickly, we had a problem in rules last year, Madam Chair.
That's 3.
Yes, ma'am. Doesn't take away from the validity of the question. We had an agreement last year in this committee, and then it went to rules, and something happened which is very unusual. Are we going to be assured that that won't happen again this year?
You know how answering something like that is a positive, it's not going to occur? I hope it's not, but there have been a lot of hours spent in the off session on this bill, discussions with all the concerned parties, and I think mountains have been moved by the Dental Association and also with the hygienist. And
Thank you, Madam
as
Chair.
I said, not everybody's 100% happy, but I think it's a great compromise.
I was just teasing you as usual, right. Representative Reinders. Representative Reinders used to be my vice chairman, and we
just worked on this, and it was killed after we got done with it last year, which surprised a lot of us.
A lot of us.
Right.
And so it's a good segue into, let me call on Dr. Weinman, who's a dentist, and he is the president of the Georgia Dental Association, and I'll let him give you an answer to that and anything else he wants to. And then if you need it from the director of the Georgia Dental Association, Frank will also.
Madam Chair, I'll give you a little correction, a past president
Past
of
president, sorry,
the Georgia Dental Association. As far as what your question was, we vetted this issue thoroughly through our Board of Trustees, our House of Delegates, and we actually had we had a complete agreement, and were given the go-ahead to do all the negotiations we did. We had our own parameters that we were to follow, which we did. We've since discussed back with those same groups, have gotten everything. I mean, it wasn't for approval, it was for information, because we already had the approval to start the process. And so we're in good shape and ready to go.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Frank, would you like just to stand up and echo that? Or if that's the way you, yes, stand, yes. I think you were the one that stood up last year and said that you had an agreement and had to bear the brunt of all my hostility in the off session because of what happened.
But I did grow up in Pennsylvania, not New Jersey.
Okay, I stand
That's
corrected.
a private joke between us.
But you went to school in New Jersey.
I went to law school in New Jersey.
Yeah, that's
yes, I
right,
did.
okay.
I can tell you this, that we kept our promise that immediately after the session, we sat down with Chairman Cooper and with Representative Hatchett, and we have worked on this bill diligently. And I truly believe, as does the House of Delegates and the members and Dr. Wyman, that we have an excellent bill here for patient safety. It covers everything. And we totally support this bill. Any questions?
Thank you. Okay, and I will tell you that there are a lot of naysayers that say this bill will not expand care, and that the dentist won't do it, or that the dental hygienist will not go out into the communities and try to help us see our children. And the dentist, I am not a beach person. I don't own a swimming suit, even though I have a swimming pool in my home, for many reasons. But I am going to go to Amelia Island at their yearly meeting. They have promised that I can talk to the whole group, especially when the wives are there, so they can really help their husbands understand. And I'm going to put it to them very bluntly about that we did this, that we have given them a lot in this bill, and allowing them to use their hygienist in their private offices when they're not there, and that I expect them to find a way to help us and to show them how they can enhance their practices at the same time of seeing some of our most needy children. And I don't think anybody in this room that knows me knows that I have trouble of making things pretty clear. And so I have that commitment all ready to go and do that and that invitation. So go ahead. More questions? Michelle Henson, Representative Henson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 quick questions. The first, is this bill subject to change in the Senate, or have you and the chair of the Senate Health Committee work together and agree on the bill as it is?
I mean, you're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Okay. I am not clairvoyant, and I do not have the powers of foreseeing how, she certainly knew we were working on it. But I think Representative Hatch and I have agreed that this is the bill that has been worked out and agreed upon.
Thank you. And one other really quick question. I noticed there's a substitute here. Could you just tell me what changes you might have put in from the original bill, which I just reread today? I mean, are they substantive, or are they?
No, there was some question about the statistics on the first page about whether it was 50% of our children that needed care and didn't get it in our areas, and so we put a significant number. There was something in it called mobile, Matt, was it mobile units, and nobody really knew what that was, and that was, we put it down to mobile dental vans and took out that, and I think that's I think that's it. There were no major changes in the bill.
Then, because of the mobile dental vans, we do have the organization, the group Help a Child Smile, with their mobile dental units, the RVs that they have. They'll be fine under this bill?
No, it doesn't change. You want to talk about the difference in the nurse?
Am I on? Okay. They don't change, but it's my understanding that general supervision will be allowed in those as long as they're within 50 miles of the dentist of register with that unit.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No. Direct supervision. It doesn't change the mobile. And this is, we have worked on this bill so closely that we can practically, talk each other's next words.
Direct.
It does. They were still just like they are. The dentist has to be in the mobile vans. One of the problems we've had over the years is that dentists in our rural areas that are struggling to keep their practices open resent, and with good measure, these vans coming in, dentists that are not in the area. Now, they have to have some kind of agreement if there's an emergency, but they come in and they do the x-rays and they do cleaning and stuff, and they don't share what they have. They don't share those with the local dentist. And then at the patient gets in trouble and needs further, they've used up the Medicaid money, there's no records for them, and they're not in the community. So what we did, we left that like it is. So the dental vans can work, but they have to have the dentist with them. But we've opened up another avenue for our local dentist and hopefully for patients to find a dental home. Dentists now within a 50-mile radius that have a practice within that 50 miles can, if they so desire, send their dental hygienist out to clean teeth on Medicaid children or to go into the nursing homes. The dentist can go in and take care of those patients, and we will be encouraging them to do so that patients within 50 miles have a dental home. And that by doing this, it will also shore up those practices. We have had dentists close their doors and leave rural Georgia areas because there was such a heavy Medicaid population and so few paying patients that they couldn't keep the doors open. So we are trying to do anything we can to help expand that. And they will be allowed to let their dental hygienist work under general supervision, to go in to the schools or wherever they are and treat our Medicaid children without the dentist being there to do the cleanings and all. So we're hoping that this will expand it. So there's two avenues to use with nursing home patients and with our Medicaid children. They can go to the dental vans, or hopefully we'll have dentists in the area, local dentists that are trying to keep the doors open in those areas. They can send their dental hygienist in to work.
And what about children with private insurance? They fall under the general?
Yes, yes, they would.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Representative Peak. He answered your question, okay. Representative Price.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can anybody answer me the charge of the, whatever the board is, the dental board, as opposed to the dental association, and what percent of the practicing licensed dentists are members of the dental association?
Frank, I recognize you.
I hope you can hear me. 63% of the licensed practicing dentists are members of the Georgia Dental Association. We have a whole slew of retired dentists as well. Would pump up the percentage, but 63 is.
And are you aware of any efforts from the dental board, and I don't know if I'm saying that entity correctly, to poll its members as to this legislation?
We've had discussions with members of the Board of Dentistry. We've explained this bill to them, and we have seen no pushback there. They understand that they work for the patients, the consumers of the state of Georgia, and they follow the law that you will all pass.
Did that answer your question, Representative Price?
Well, I guess it answered my question, but I guess my comment would be, if I'm allowed to make a comment, that in passing, anytime I've talked to a dentist recently, I bring this up to see what their opinion is, because I down here you hear these deals being cut, and that doesn't always, to me, translate into sound practice. So I ask dentists, what do they think about this, and I have yet to find one who agrees that it's sound practice of dentistry. So I'm just trying to figure out, what entities are in agreement to move forward on this.
If I may.
Okay.
Representative Price, we have a House of Delegates made up of approximately 122 representatives from around the state. And they are representative of the 7 dental districts in the state. And they come together twice a year. And we brought this issue to them back in the summer. We went through all the patient safety issues. And I think the difference between this year and last year is that general supervision was just sitting out there. Now, this bill has a ton of patient protection in there. That body voted unanimous, less one. So that's the mandate that we carry out, and then that happened again in December on the same issues, as long as the patient protection safety issues were in there. And you know, I would ask everyone to remember this, is that, as Representative Hatchett said, this is still the prerogative of the dentist. The dentist, at the end of the day, has the decision of whether or not to permit general supervision of those hygienists in safety net settings and in settings in their own private practice. So it's less government intrusion, actually.
Representative Price, I mean, as you know, we have the right to pass bills whether anybody agrees with them or not. And, you know, we do try to find compromises, but the wisdom of the legislature, we have the ability to do what we think is best for patient care. We have worked closely with people on this issue. I think one of the problems, I had the same problems. I was with I ran into another representative, and she was with a dentist from the Noonan area. And this was during, you know, after session last year, and it came up about the dental bill. And that dentist says, oh yeah, my husband's against it. It's so that the dental hygienist can practice independently, totally. And I said, no ma'am, that's not it. A few years ago, as you know, any representative can put in a bill and say whatever they want to say in it. And a few years ago, there was a bill that went out, and somehow or other it was sent out over the Dental Association. This was before Frank was there. And there was part of a sentence left off in the letter that went out to the dentist. And the way the letter read, it would have been independent practice, but if you had the other part of that sentence, they would have known it wasn't a move to get independent practice. And I think that that is still out there. So I ran into that with the dentist, his wife that was with us the other day. So, and like Representative Hatchett said, not everybody's going to be happy. There are going to be some dentists that are not going to be happy with this. There are going to be some dental hygienists that are not happy with it. But we feel like we've worked out a good bill. Everybody has gotten something. The dentists have gotten something out of this. The dental hygienists have gotten something out of this. And the dental assistants, the whole dental team, has profited for this for one reason, as far as Representative Hatchett and I were concerned. And that was to expand dental care to our most neediest citizens in the state of Georgia. And I think, let me ask somebody from the Dental Association, Pam, you want to come up? And Pam's with the Georgia Dental Health Association. Pam, how many states allow their dental hygienists to do this?
At present time, 47 states in this country allow this. We're just one of the last 3 that do not, until now, potentially.
Like to do that. And the Georgia, and you're with the Georgia Dental Hygienists Association, are you in support of the bill?
We are in support of the bill. We thank you, Chairman Cooper, and your committee members for bringing this together, for all your efforts, because House Bill 154 will help to increase preventive dental services for all of Georgia's children and seniors that are most needy. So we're looking forward to being able to move forward with this.
Thank you very much. Okay, Representative Bennett, do you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a great opportunity to extend care to our most vulnerable kids in particular. In the situation, I just need clarification. In a situation where a hygienist is going into the schools each year, potentially to check the same kids repeatedly year after year, in one of these sections, section B, 2B, I believe it says, a patient must be examined by the authorized licensed dentist at a minimum of 12-month intervals. I am on line, I believe it's section 2. Oh, what line? Thank you so much, Representative. Line 100. That's so much easier for me. Line 100. A patient must be examined by the authorizing licensed dentist at a minimum of 12-month intervals. And then on line 165, it says it shall be the sole discretion of the authorizing licensed dentist as to whether or not to require an initial examination of the patient prior to the performance. I just want to
Okay, those
understand. And
both
that-
of those are apply in the private practice of the dentist. So you can have general supervision, like you said, at 2B, that the person has to basically be an established patient with that dentist for there to be general supervision. And, you know, unless that dentist is out of the office that day or you know, he's got this practice going on, and that's, you know, that's not necessarily the case that would happen, but, you know, that it wouldn't be direct supervision. But if he's not there and they come in and they've got a cleaning scheduled, then they don't necessarily have to see the dentist that day unless the hygienist sees some, as the wording is, some issue of widespread dental disease in the mouth before they start working on it. So it allows for general supervision as long as they're an established patient. Is that okay?
And so, in summary, for children in schools, once they're initially seen by the dentist or at the discretion of the dentist, every year that they are repeatedly seen, do they or do they not have to be seen within a 12-month period?
I'm not sure.
By the dentist. The 12-month period, I guess, is what I need clarification on.
Yeah,
Madam Chairman, no.
Can he help?
Okay. Scott. Scott, if you'll identify yourself, please.
I'm Scott LaFranco. I am the General Counsel and Director of Government Relations for the Georgia Dental Association. To answer your question, Representative Bennett, the first portion with the exam in 12-month periods is in the private dental practice section. So if you're in a private dental office, every new patient of record has at a minimum has to receive an exam every 12 months. Now, if the clinician sees that there's a potential issue and sees that this patient is particularly at risk, then they can actually lower that 12-month cycle to say, you know, if this child's particularly unsafe, I'll lower it to 3-month intervals. Now, the other component you've asked about is regarding the children in these other settings, and that is considered, the way that this bill has been drafted, it says that it's left up to the discretion of the supervising dentist whether to require an exam first. So I guess to go to your question, that they will receive an exam if the supervising dentist sees that there's an issue that needs to be done, and it will be, you know, the hygienist. There's other language here that says on line 127, as Representative Hatchett pointed out, that is no hygiene services can be performed in these other settings if the patient comes in complaining of dental pain or has clearly visible evidence of widespread dental disease. So when that patient sits in the chair and the hygienist, you know, the patient complains that they have pain, or when the hygienist does their visual exam and sees that there's a lot of widespread dental disease, then it automatically has to get referred to a dentist for resolution before an unsupervised cleaning can take place.
And Representative Bennett, I just checked with Betsy, and, you know, they are correct on what they said. I think the reason is some patients would never see the dentist in practice, and that is really not a good practice. They would just come in and see the hygienist, and hygienists are not dentists. And, you know, they don't always catch everything. They're very good, and I respect what they do. But like in other professions, you know, they are not the doctor. And so this is so that they just don't always come in and see the hygienist and never see the physician. Like that. Pardon? Okay. That's the end of the questions. I'm ready to see what the committee would like to do. What's the...
Madam Chair, but can I?
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to close in full disclosure and transparency that I'm not a dentist, I'm not a dental hygienist, but I am the son of a dentist. So I just want everybody to know that. And at one of our meetings over the summer, it was a 7 o'clock breakfast meeting in Marietta with another dentist and myself and the chair. We probably spent a couple of hours discussing, and all of a sudden the light bulb went off, I think, with all of us, that single practitioners, which is what my father was, you know, and I think Lee was until his son came in with him, but they're stuck at their office, and nothing can happen there legally unless they're there. And this allows for, them to schedule cleanings and schedule things in their offices, and then they could go out and basically do marketing for their own practice while they're still working in their office. And I think it's going to be a great, I hope, a welcome to the dentist if we pass this, especially those sole practitioners.
And I missed a couple of people that had signed up. Vicki Johnson with the Council on Aging, if you just want to stand up and.
Sure. Madam Chair, committee members, thank you. The Georgia Council on Aging and our Grassroots Advocacy Coalition, COAGE, have made this a legislative priority for 2 years, and we want to thank you, Madam Chair, for working very hard, everyone involved for working very hard, because we see this as an important step toward bringing better oral health care to seniors in Georgia.
Thank you very much, and I have to give let Matt share the credit with me, Representative Hatchett. Melanie McNeil, who's our state's long-term care ombudsman and does a great job. Melanie?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Some of you may remember that I was actually at the Council on Aging in 1997, and we had this issue even back then.
In 1997?
1997, and it preceded me even. So this has been something we've been working on for a long time, to have more access, especially for older adults and those who live in facilities. So I just urge you to support this bill.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Polly McKinney with Voices of Georgia Children.
Hi, I just want to say we totally support this bill. And for those of you that don't know, children with poor oral health are 3 times more likely to miss school due to dental pain. It's a huge driver of school absences. And as many of you already know, we're big believers in school-based health, and this is just a great piece of it. So thanks for all your work and all the nice kumbaya.
Thank you very much. Okay, now I'm ready to entertain a motion, and I think Representative Reinders hit his light first. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair, in the hopes that this committee doesn't have to hear this was just a good first step and we're revisiting it every few years.
Not on my life, and I think
Well,
I
we've
can
seen that
speak
movie
for-
before.
Yeah, I think I can speak for Representative Hatchett too. We are going down this road again.
I make a motion to pass.
Okay, I have a motion to pass. Do I have a second? I've got a second from Representative Henson. I don't know who else was down there, but a couple of seconds. Is there any discussion or questions from the committee? Are we finished? Okay, we will take a vote. Everybody in favor of passing the substitute to House Bill 154, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Well, the ayes have it. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing this bill work. Thank you, and go forward. So thank you, committee. We are adjourned.